And we are here, people. It is 2023. We have left the old year behind, on with the new. This is technically the start of season 5. I'm not quite sure. We'll officially be rolling on Sunday when Last of Us premieres. But for right now, we are here to talk about, quite frankly, a lovely surprise. You know, like I said, for as much as we've been dogging on Netflix these last couple of years, Netflix loves to throw in these brief little gems that they'll just give to us out of nowhere. And they'll just be so good that we just say, why can't Netflix just make this stuff all the time? And to which the answer is because the only people that watch it are people like us who actually appreciate good things. I'm here once again with Eli. Eli, all I got to say first off is thank you for putting me onto the show, because this is a show that I probably would have been like, yeah, that looks cool, and then wouldn't have watched it until like the end of the year. So thank you for putting me onto it and making sure that I actually watch it in the moment, given how hard that is just in general. You have any thoughts on this before we get started?
Oh, I'm just saying, I just think it was a really fun experience. I really enjoyed myself while I was watching it and just kind of reflecting on myself in between the episodes. I think the whole premise of the show is really interesting, and I'd maybe like to see more shows kind of take a unique approach like this. So
For
happy to get into it.
For sure. All of that and more we will get into on tonight's episode of the Talkin TV podcast. We're back, people. What is going on, people? It is Thursday night, January 12th. We are 12 days into the new year. Sirio, come on, man. You're already getting started. We just started. Give us a little bit of time. No, I'm just kidding. I'm here once again with Eli Holicky. Eli has co-hosted several podcasts with me, dating all the way back to Wheel of Time in November of 2021. God, that feels like an eternity ago. But
Really
we're here to
does.
talk about what is, quite frankly, one of the few surprises that have come out already in 2023. You know, I just got back from watching Megan. This has been a year that has already thrown so many surprises at us, and we haven't even gotten to really any of the big, huge hits yet. But first off, Eli, I wanted to give you the spotlight since you were the one that kind of illustrated this show to me. You know, this was a show that I had seen some promotion from, you know, not really I think I watched a trailer for it. I think I saw some stuff on the Hollywood Reporter, some stuff online, but I want you to break it down. When did you first become aware of Kaleidoscope? What is it exactly that gripped you about it? And when did you realize that this was going to be something actually worth watching as opposed to just another something that Netflix puts out that is complete and total garbage, but they just work the algorithm in their favor in order to make sure that everybody watches it and everybody talks about it?
Oh, that's a great series of questions. Well, I think I found out about the show probably a month before it dropped. I saw like headline on an article that said that Netflix was putting out this like new first of its kind show where you get to like watch the episodes in any order, and that kind of affects how, your general viewing experience. I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting. That's I didn't really understand how that could have worked, but I was like, okay, I've given it a try. And then I saw it was also a heist show. I'm like, okay, let's check in another box for me. I love anything to do with a heist. And then Giancarlo Esposito is what sealed the deal for me. I was like, okay, I'll give it an episode or two and see if it'll work out. And I was very pleasantly surprised. I was really enjoyed myself with this one.
Yeah, most definitely. Like I said, Netflix had, I'm not going to say a rough year. Well, actually, yeah, behind the scenes, they had a pretty rough year. Like, pretty much almost everything else, pretty much every movie studio stock just plummeted in the toilet in 2022 coming out of the pandemic. And overall, Netflix is just one that they needed a win. They had a couple in Q4 of last year. They had that Wednesday Addams show. They had the Dahmer show. They had a few that were like pretty successful. But like, those shows are like typical Netflix shows. Like, you kind of knew that they were going to hit and that they were going to be like big poppy hits amongst the kids, amongst the Gen Zers from the minute that you saw the trailers drop. Dahmer was like a Ryan Murphy production, still kind of capitalizing on the weird serial killer found footage, was a serial killer true crime craze that gripped people back in 2019. Wednesday is a popular IP with a big name star that had, plenty of stuff, plenty of memeable and TikTokable moments with all that. But this was interesting because this, from the outset, seemed to get like none of the typical Netflix marketing, not that like any of Netflix's marketing is really typical, but for the most part, this was something that actually like seemed interesting and actually seemed like it was going to have legs. And so when I when I read the premise for this, that this was going to be something where, okay, the viewing order of this didn't necessarily matter to the viewing experience, I'm like, okay, this is something different. This is something that I haven't seen before. This is something that could be really interesting, something that could be fascinating. And for the most part, I was like, okay, we could do this, could be something worth watching. And needless to say, when I started watching it, I'm like, it immediately hooked me. I'm like, okay, this is something that's actually could be good, if that makes any sense. But we'll get more into that in a bit. But for right now, Eli, so what's it called? I think in order to like kind of get this conversation really going, the biggest thing is, first things first, I want to know is, so I assume you had a list as far as like which episodes you viewed it in, like what viewing order you had it in.
I did. Yep.
Yep.
I have it right here.
So I want you to read that off, because I said I was going to watch this in chronological order, and I'll say I don't necessarily know if I stuck to that per se, but I think I did a decent job. Like Netflix basically breaks down a specific order within which to watch these episodes, and we'll get more into that as time goes on. But for right now, Eli, which order did you watch it in? I'm actually really interested to hear this.
Yeah, so the order I actually watched them in, I started out with Blue, which was the episode that right before the heist. So I was kind of jumping right into like the middle of the action. Then I followed up with Red, which was the episode right after the heist. And so I'm kind of seeing the follow out of, holy crap, what just like went down and things like that. And really interesting way to kind of hook it for myself. I was very intrigued by that point. Then I watched Yellow, which was, kind of like a chronologically, I believe it was like a few weeks before the height, or a few months before the height. And then I followed up with Pink, which was chronologically the last episode, right after Red, kind of where everyone kind of ended up, and or where it kind of sets up where they could end up, I guess. And then I watched Orange, another kind of middle episode. Then I started with, I continued with Green, which I believe was the one you started with. It's
chronologically within the order, it's the second episode.
Yeah. And then I ended up watching Violet 7th, which was the first one chronologically, and then I ended up finishing it up with White, which is the actual episode of the heist.
Right. So basically, in order to kind of break it down, the way the Kaleidoscope functions, Kaleidoscope sets itself, again, it is a heist show, so it follows a lot of the heist tricks and tropes and formulas. It centers around Giancarlo Esposito's character, whose character's name is Ray Vernon, who also goes by the alias Leo Papp, who essentially breaks out of jail and sets up a heist in order to get back at somebody who was revealed to be his former partner, who has now become the head of this like massive financial, one of those crazy super high up agencies, that's been like a villain and a constant trope in a lot of different heist things. And so naturally he assembles a crew, gets everything going. The FBI gets involved. There's some backstory that gets revealed, some secrets that are revealed about the characters. They pull off the heist. A bunch of stuff goes wrong, and the characters each go on their separate ways and suffer their own individual fates. But so what's so interesting about this is, as Eli was alluding to, this is a show where Netflix deliberately, or rather, so Netflix and the showrunner, that being Eric Garcia, who is the author of actually one of my favorite Ridley Scott films, Matchstick Men, which is a movie that I would heavily recommend that you watch and that everybody else watches. It's a great movie, as well as the showrunner for a show called Anonymous Rex, which aired on Sci-Fi in 2004. Basically, the way that they structure the show is that each episode still functions as a part of the 8-sequence structure in order to completely fill out the story, right? But the way that they structure each individual episode is that it almost works like its own movie, so that even though the viewing order, it has a chronological order, and then it has an order in which it is meant to be viewed, I guess you could say, it is essentially set to function where, again, they are deliberately playing around with the story structure so that it does not matter which order you watch the episodes in. So essentially you have a series of 8 individual standalone films that happen to feature the same set of characters participating in the same story that can be viewed in any order. So if we're going based off of chronological order, right? Because there's an order in which, now this is something else that I'd be interested in, is I don't know if Netflix had the same order of episodes for everyone's individual Netflix feed, because if I'm remembering correctly, I believe that the way in which they are ordered on Netflix is it's green first, then yellow, then blue, then orange, then violet, then red, then pink, then white. I might have mixed up yellow and green, but I believe that that's the order in which it was gotten to me. That's the order in which I watched it.
I think I remember it being in that order when the episodes were presented to me.
Right, exactly. And then, but in chronological order, it takes place, it goes Let me get this right. So violet, which is 24 years before the heist. Then green, which is 7 years before the heist. Yellow, which is 6 weeks before the heist. Then orange, which is 3 weeks before the heist. Blue, 5 days before the heist. Then white, the final episode, which is the heist itself. Then red, the morning after the heist. Then pink, 6 months after the heist. And each episode, the way that it opens with like this kaleidoscope as structure, this smorgasbord of colors that eventually settles on one color. And then it has the title card that tells you which episode it is and which sequential order it takes place in, so that you have some idea of it. And then it sends you into the episode. You know, it's playing around again thematically with the idea of the fact of a kaleidoscope, the fact that, you know, when you're looking at it, you can kind of see all these colors at once. So it is kind of interesting how it plays around with story structure in that sense. I think it's doing something that I wish Netflix did more, which is playing around with story structure. Whenever they do something like that, I think that's when they're at their best, you know, because the last time they did something like this was when they did the Black Mirror solo movie that came out in 2018, the Bandersnatch movie, the Choose Your Own Adventure thing, because the reason why I like that is because that played, I think, into the structure of where that's the story about a guy who's designing a Choose Your Own Adventure video game. So the fact that us as the viewers are choosing our own adventure, it adds almost like this meta nature to it that kind of almost enhances the viewing experience. And I think this is similar as well, because in the sense of where a heist, I've always said it, kind of functions almost like a puzzle, or like what's it called, or like you're making a film, or like you're making a project, something in general. You know, it's got this series of steps that it has to execute, that you have to execute, you know, in order to pull it off. And what I like about it is that it essentially has this baseline understanding that at the end of the day, the heist is the climax, and that's what it's building to. You know, typically, like if this were a movie, you would have the heist be the end of the second act, and then the last 2 episodes, you know, what happens afterwards would be the third act, you know. But I think that one actually goes against it, because what Netflix recommended in the viewing order was that you save the heist for last. And no matter what order you watch the episodes in, they recommend that you save white for last, because white has a sense of thematic conclusion that it comes to, that if you watch it before red and pink, the 2 episodes that come after it, you get this sense of kind of what's it called? There's not that sense of fulfillment that you get from watching white last. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I'd completely agree with that. I think the ending to white is a lot more satisfying than the actual ending to pink. But I think that, you know, pink is I feel like pink is definitely not meant to be last, because they purposely leave some of the characters' endings like ambiguous. So you kind of get to draw your own conclusions based on, you know, your thoughts, like how you kind of have seen them develop over the course of the show, which, depending on the order of the episodes you watched, might be different. Without getting into spoilers, there was like 2 characters' relationships, right? I didn't even know like the significance of their relationship until like, you know, the 4th episode that I was watching, and I was like, and then it clicked for me. But then if you had watched it first, you probably would have that understanding all the way through. So it's, you know, you're kind of putting a puzzle together in different order, and that ultimately kind of shapes your experience about it. And, you know, I feel like it leads to a lot of discussions, especially with like some of the certain characters' endings that, like, you know, are kind of thrown up in the air. I think it does a really great job of, you know, kind of leading to those kinds of things. And I think ultimately that's kind of what makes a good show, is just kind of allowing people to have that kind of these thought-provoking discussions about it. Like, you know, I think it's really cool.
Absolutely. And the thing that really it strikes the hardest with me is that what I've been talking about, and what I've liked so much about this era of prestige TV that we've lived in, and kind of what I like about just, you know, the HBO of it all in general, and like what I liked about what Netflix used to be doing before they kind of switched it to essentially becoming the new CW, is that it plays around with the idea of stories and what we like about them, you know, because for the longest time, we only had kind of this one way of telling stories with films. You know, they experimented around a lot and they messed around a lot, but for the most part, it was, again, you only have this certain amount of time to get to know these characters and to tell this story, you know? And then once we got into TV, you know, it expanded out. You had all of a sudden all this time to spend with all these different characters, you know? But then unfortunately, that kind of created for a lot of excess, a lot of wasted space, a lot of characters, a lot of storylines that kind of went nowhere, you know? And what I like about the streamers is when they do something like this, when they can play around with the idea of story, when they can play around with, again, you have like this set of characters while also mixed in with this super tight plot, and how they're able to kind of experiment around. You know, it doesn't always work, but when it does, it creates for a really satisfying experience that, again, takes what you know, messes around with it a bit, and still kind of can give you some of the same results. But since you kind of already have that base understanding of it, it kind of enhances it and makes it a little bit better. You know, that's kind of where it always comes down to for me, because you're right in the sense of where in the sense of where, depending on which order you watch the episodes in, right, you could have a certain understanding and a certain relationship with the characters and where they go. You could like some characters, you could hate different characters. The other thing too also is that it plays into this idea that kind of the idea of monoculture, which we've talked about over the last couple of years during COVID, kind of ended in 2019. And so now, since everybody else is kind of always divided and never really going to be totally unified on one thing, and there's never going to be one thing anymore that kind of has this unanimous grandstanding opinion amongst everybody else. I like that there are still projects out there that can kind of play around with that idea, where it's like, okay, so you may have this one perspective on characters, on the characters in the story, versus what the intent of the creators and the crafters were. So why don't we make that a part of the story? Like your relationship with Giancarlo Esposito's character, Ray, could be completely different depending on which episode you start with. I personally started with Green, so I think for me that was a good place to start as far as like getting a basic introduction, but as far as like knowing the backstory for his character, I didn't really know that, and I didn't really need to know that, and I didn't really per se care, because I was just so invested on the build up to the heist and everything, because those next couple episodes that I watched after Green, that being Yellow, Orange, and Blue, first when they put together the crew, then when they're just getting ready for the heist, and then once you get the FBI involved, and so they have such this nice build to it. And then smack dab in the middle, I watched their backstory, and all of a sudden it adds this whole new context to Esposito's character and why he's doing this and everything. And I'm like, this is so fucking cool. I don't remember the last time that I felt this way towards anything that I've watched,
No, I completely agree. Especially with the backstory episode, Violet. I purposely saved that for like my second to last episode right before the heist, because I was seeing like the kind of how their relationship evolved, and just this like deep, like seated hatred that, Giancarlo Esposito's character had for, this Roger Salas. I'm like, oh man, like something bad must have really gone down.
Right.
But I, obviously the story plays around with like ambiguity, like at least from like an ethical standpoint. It's like the question I kept asking myself over the course of the series is like, how much is, this person's fault, or who's really more responsible for the way things are, or like, is Leo right in feeling that, or was he the one that maybe messed up and maybe caused a lot of this to happen, and maybe a lot of his anger is coming from within himself, which I think was great. Like the fact that I just kind of had that, like you're constantly asking yourself these questions, like, or as you're watching, I thought was like just absolutely fantastic. And I thought, the resolution I got was like absolutely great, and I loved it.
Yeah, which is a trademark of a good show. We talk all the time, and it's unfortunately become apparent even in streaming, where, again, even though the episode count of most shows now has been so reduced, again, we used to get like anywhere between like 13 to 22 to 23 to 25 episodes of TV shows a year, and now some TV shows don't even get 6 episodes. Some things come out as 5 episodes and they're an extended movie, and sometimes they don't even know how to properly utilize their tension and their story, and especially from Netflix, which at times, again, for the Netflix, the longest time, I'm like, how in the hell do you make 10 hours of a TV show feel like 25? How is that possible? So some of their Marvel shows, I remember back in the day when I was watching them, I'm like, they had a great start with Daredevil. Then after a while, I'm like, Jesus Christ, do we need 13 hours of this in order to tell the story? And here it's like every single one, there was not a moment where I was bored. There was not a moment where I wasn't asking questions. There was not a moment when I wasn't interested and locked in. Even characters who you thought were going to be like super generic and one note, like the Courtney character, Bob, even they ended up like having more layers to them. Like every one of these characters was super interesting and fascinating and had a great backstory and a great motivation for wanting in on the heist. Even certain like goofier characters, like what's his name, like Stan, who who's introduced in Green as Ray's cellmate. Even who I thought was going to be like goofy comedic relief, even he ended up having like a great thing. The Judy character, who I thought was going to go in one way, ended up going in a completely different direction. Even Salas, who, again, played by Rufus Sewell, who has been cast God only knows how many times as like generic one-note bad guy, one after another. Even he gets like, once you learn his and Ray's backstory, and Esposito, credit where credit is due. The man, I swear to God, we all love him for this reason, but I swear to God, the man has been playing Gus Fring in so many different shows over the last couple of years. I'm like, Jesus Christ. I'm like, getting Gus Fring and Better Call Saul back was a gift enough as well. But it's like, he's also got to play Gus Fring in The Mandalorian. He's got to play Gus Fring in The Boys. He's got to play Gus Fring as fucking Lex Luthor in the Harley Quinn show. He's been playing Gus Fring in so many different things. He's even in the Jungle Book movie where he voices a fucking CGI wolf. I'm like, you gotta be playing Gus Fring in that too? Like, we know you're a great actor. He worked with Spike Lee for like 10 years before he got Breaking Bad. I'm like, we know you're capable of other performances. Can you give us something other than Gus Fring? And we finally got that, Like,
No,
Esposito,
I agree. It was extremely refreshing kind of seeing him in like a new light, because pretty much everything you'd mentioned are like pretty much the only things I'd seen him in. I haven't seen like some of his older stuff.
Right.
And I mean, I was just like, yeah, I mean, we knew the guy was talented, obviously, but it's really nice to just see him, like, at least with a different like tone of voice and accent, and things like that. Little things that kind of go a long way.
He's doing a little bit of like I can't even tell what he's doing. It's almost like he's doing like a mix of like a Southern drawl mixed with like a 1940s thing, and it should be super corny, but he makes it work, and like especially once you like see like him when he's younger, and I think they do a good job because they do a little bit of CG, Uncanny Valley with a little bit of makeup touch up. I think they do a way better job of de-aging him than they do in Better Call Saul, where they don't even bother putting any old age on there. It's the sole flaw of Better Call Saul. The fact that is supposed to be a prequel to Breaking Bad, but all those characters look 10 years older than they were in Breaking Bad, So yeah. The lesson about that, the better. But yeah, and even that, like, once you like learn more of his motivation, like the relationship that he has with his daughter, like specifically when you see her when she's a kid, I think that is some of the best acting that I've seen from him since his Spike Lee days, when he was doing Spike Lee movies and one after another in the early 90s. And it just, yeah, it was fantastic. And yeah, and the other thing too also that was surprising is the ending is kind of a downer, I mean, there's a couple of upsides, there's a couple of ambiguity with some of the characters, but most of the heist things I've seen, for the most part, they end on like, a pretty good note. I always think of like Ocean's 11, where it's like, yeah, the good guys, they get away with the loot, they got one over on the bad guys, even if they had to, do maybe a couple more years in jail. For the most part, everybody walked away clean, and this one, it's like, nah, most of them don't get away clean. Even some of the FBI guys who get a little bit in too deep. There were a lot.
There's really no winners in this show.
There really aren't. It just shows that when it comes to it truly is, as Logan Roy said. And when it comes to matters of this stuff, money wins always, and they are the only winners. And it's just, yeah, it's great stuff. It really, really is great stuff. It kills me because like, so many people our age, are victims of the algorithm and just ingest whatever it is that it feeds to them. And then and again, it's never shows like this that are successful, because these things are actually well written, crafted with thought, and the algorithm does not cater to people who actually think, critically, specifically, and it's just always disappointing because I know that this is something that, again, if this had come out like, I'll even say it now because it's been that long, 10 years ago on HBO, I feel like this would have been like, this would have like taken a little bit to pick up some momentum, but it would have been like, really heavily talked about and stuff. But again, it's like Netflix dropped this in January, and like, I don't know a single person who's talking about this other than you and me. I've been talking to a lot of people about it, trying to recommend them. Maybe this will have a second life later on, maybe. But yeah, I don't know a single person who's watching this or is going to like this, and I'm like, man, like, this is the shit that I wish we were getting, instead of crap like Obi-Wan Kenobi, which somehow got a fucking Producers Guild nomination for miniseries. No idea how that happened, but yeah, that is just the world that we live in, unfortunately, when it comes to the media. Yeah, so let's get into spoilers, because I want to spoil some stuff, because people, just in order to kind of understand this. So you said you had some notes that you had written down on this?
Yeah, so what I did, I thought it'd be really interesting to like kind of look back on just like, if I could just put my thoughts down, and then once I had the full picture, go back and just see like, were some of my initial hunches right, or like kind of was I thinking about this character the right way? And honestly, I think taking notes in between each episode like heightened the experience for me. I had just as much fun like writing my like thoughts down and everything than as I did like watching the show itself. And honestly, looking back at some of my predictions, I think it's like absolutely hilarious. I did get some things like kind of right as I could have without like seeing the big twists, but I mean, I enjoyed it. I really did. I lot of it is just hate speech about Bob. But
it's Jai Courtney and kind of like his post. Jai Courtney's an interesting one because Jai Courtney for the first half of his career was one of those guys that was like kind of becoming like Hollywood poison. He was a little bit like early days Sam Worthington and Taylor Kitsch, that guy Alex Pettifer, where again it just felt like everything that he was in, he was was just getting dogged on. Like he was what's it called? Like the worst part about the Divergent movies, and he was in that awful fifth Die Hard movie with Bruce Willis. And then it weirdly started to turn for him in 2016, where ironically enough, as awful and terrible as that first Suicide Squad movie was, he was kind of one of the best and most entertaining parts around it. And it feels like ever since then, he's been like on this weird career trajectory where he hasn't been in much, but every time he pops up in something, he weirdly ends up being the best part about it. And I think this is kind of another one. And I feel like this one is the biggest thing where, again, everything that he's been in, he's almost like carrying all the contempt and all that hatred that people had for him in the early days of his career when like he was first being known, and just channeling that into all of his characters, just play the biggest asshole possible. And it strangely works, like in a sense, because this guy, the character that plays Bob, who's a safecracker that is revealed to be dating Judy, who is Stan's crush, and who develops a little bit of a backstory, kind of bullies his way into the heist, but ends up proving to be ultimately valuable because he is a very good safecracker. And strangely enough, who's somebody who seems like he's going to come off as one of the most one-note, generic, could not be more obvious that he's going to screw over the rest of the crew and run off with the money all by himself, and ends up having like a really kind of almost tragic turn. And while I don't quite feel for him, and I think he definitely got what he deserved, I also kind of can't help but feel for him in a sense of where he at the end of the day, as awful and terrible of a person as he was, he still kind of felt like he really did feel something for Judy and felt screwed over by her. And I'm like what? Like how is a heist show being this deep with the characters? So run over me. What was one of your predictions that you got right, and what was one of your predictions that you got wrong?
So, as I said, I watched Red, which is like, the second to last episode.
Right. And to remind people, chronologically, Red is the episode that takes place like literally like what? An hour, like immediately after the events of the heist.
Yep. And then Pink not too long after that. So I saw the ending more than I saw like the beginning of things. So, I thought, one prediction I made was about Hannah in regards to like kind of the aftermath of her relationship with her father. And I thought, especially that phone call, like right at the end of Pink, where he like wanted to come back into her life and was like trying to make that step towards being a good father again. It just, something about it to me just seemed like she might have been hiding something. And that was like proven right. And where we ultimately like kind of found out that obviously those two characters knew. They were the only two characters that between like the rest of the main cast knew about the twist and everything. But it did seem like Hannah was hiding something. I just didn't know that, she was kind of out in the open with her father, which was a kind of a nice surprise, that he ended up lying to the rest of the crew about, where the money really went, because Hannah ended up secretly stealing it from everyone. I made a prediction that Judy wasn't going to end up with either Bob or Stan. I felt like Bob was going to definitely end up being killed.
Yeah, if there's one thing that was pretty obvious, though, Bob. If there's one character that's not making it out of the show alive, it's Bob.
And that's what I kind of liked about the ending, was they purposely made it ambiguous, and where they don't give you an answer. But I like.
So I was about to say, I'm like, so you could either. That's a real Schrodinger's cat scenario right there, because you could literally go either or there. You're not right, but you're not wrong either.
Yeah. Me personally, I think she ditched Stan. But
unfortunately, because again, you look at what she does in the events of the heist itself. Unfortunately, R.I.P. As much as we loved him, but killing RJ, strangling Bob, and then, but unfortunately, Stan, good as what he was, like Stan proved that he was good at what he did, but Stan just proved that he made too many mistakes. He's too goofy at the end of the day, taking an Uber to the fucking meetup after the heist. Like, come on, man.
And I thought Judy just had too much internal conflict. Yeah. And just that she was going to be just too indecisive and not end up really making her own call and going her own way, or either with Leo or wherever the rest of them went. But so that was one thing I was pleasant to get right. I was pleased with a few character arcs, like Stan. I thought I like kind of made some notes about him, because I said, because I saw where like he's the competent, one of the more level-headed members of the squad. And, he's like proving himself to be pretty useful. And then I see him like in green or yellow, and I'm like, wow, he honestly came a long way,
Yeah,
you know? And
definitely.
it's just little things like that that just really like show that, you know, the changes, you know, versus, I mean, again, it all depends on the order you watch.
Right. It all depends on the order that you watch it in. Yeah. Now, I'll run off some of mine, some predictions. Again, I watched it pretty chronologically. So for me, I think things built out a little bit more naturally. I think the biggest surprise for me was I had a feeling that, you know, Ray definitely had a very personal attachment and reason for wanting to pull off this heist, you know, having to do with Salas, or as he is revealed to be, you know, Graham Davies is his real name. But I didn't know just how personal it would be. And once I saw the decision, and really just how I think what I was wrong on is I thought that Salas was going to be more of like a direct antagonist. And then the fact that, you know, when it's revealed, the reason, unfortunately, for the heist and the reason why Ray went to jail, that being because when they were attempting to pull off a heist in their younger days, Stan's wife is unfortunately working for one of their targets, and is and so when Roger indirectly sets off a fire in order for them to get away when their heist goes wrong, he unintentionally ends up trapping Ray's wife in the fire, and she ends up dying. And there's a moment where he may or may not have been able to help Stan get her out. And unfortunately, that was that didn't end up being the case. He ended up turning and running. So that ended up being a lot more ambiguous than I thought. And that's, again, for me, just the biggest surprise about the show in general, is that there was a lot more ambiguity around all of these characters than I thought. You know, every single time I thought one of these characters was going to turn out to be one note and generic, they proved me dead wrong, you know, like completely dead wrong, you know? But two things for me. One, Ava, who we barely talked about, it's just an awesome character. I thought that she was going to be like typical, like, eye candy, but I liked her relationship. I liked her stance. I liked her position in the heist. You know, everything about her, and especially her relationship with the FBI agent. What is her name? Agent Abbasi. Everything about her relationship with her, it made sense. You know, how Abbasi was able to get to her. How Abbasi, who I thought again was going to be like kind of a token insert mouthpiece character, if you will, and ended up being way more three-dimensional than I thought. If I had to say there was a weakling acting wise, it would probably be her. But even still, like, the character is so well written that I didn't necessarily care per se. And even that ended up going well. So for me, the biggest surprise was so three things. One, Ava's death, because I thought that Ava was just too competent of a character. So unfortunately, when she goes, I was like, it was both heartbreaking, but also, again, just a tragic circumstance. Then the second part was, again, Abbasi's death. Like, half the deaths that happened in this show, I'm like, where did these come from? You know, and what's crazy about Abbasi's death is Abbasi's death, unlike Ava's, was set up way early on by what's it called? By I don't remember who it was. I think it was Hannah, I believe, who was the one that said, yeah, these are the types of guys who, again, you'll shake hands with someone on the street, and then the next minute you'll be dead like 2 minutes later. You know, that happened to Abbasi, and I'm like, holy shit. Like, that's fucking crazy.
There were quite a few moments like that where it's like these one-off lines that end up kind of having more like substance to them, like the Pink Sands line in Blue that, God, where Bob ends up, like, you know, he's like dying on the beach, and his blood mixes to create the pink. He kind of got his happy ending in a way.
In a way, yeah, exactly.
Not really, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then but then one thing that I absolutely called, like, from the minute that I saw, and I think we talked about this too, was the fact that it was Hannah that ended up winning the day, where, again, Ray and Hannah had this whole thing that they were working on behind the scenes in order to get the bonds, but Hannah kind of had her own little plan involved as well, which is that the plan was to never walk away with the bonds, but rather to reclaim them for the triplets, who are kind of this mega conglomerate Illuminati group who Salas is attempting to do business with, whose bonds he has taken in place in their state that the crew are attempting to rip off, when in reality Ray and Hannah are attempting to get them in order to screw over Salas and get him sent to jail. But Hannah knew that if they did this, then the triplets would ultimately come after them, and so as a result, their plan, their cross within a cross, their play within a play, was to instead take the bonds for themselves, screw over the rest of the crew, sell it back to the triplets, who would simply be able to reclaim the insurance money on them. Therefore, they would be able to walk away clean. What's it called? Unfortunately, Ray is not able to make it. So that ends up leading to, again, the fact of that there are little clues that place up to it, which is that kind of Hannah's roommate, who's kind of like a dumb one-note insert character that's just there, like, trading quips, but Hannah gets her a job in the mailroom. And I'm like, this character is way too dumb and way too obvious. Like, this has to be playing in somewhat, and especially in Red, when I see them go out of the building with the FedEx pack, I'm like, oh, that's the bonds. They have them. The roommate was in on it, you know, so that much was pretty obvious from the get-go. One one more thing that I did not see coming was how Ray dies, and it sucked because Ray, unfortunately, after a while, he's suffering from, he's another reason for why he desperately wants to do this heist is because it's revealed early on that he's got Parkinson's. And so by the time you see him at the end, he's a mess. He could barely stand. He's shaking all over the place and he's a mess. So when he's going to meet up with Hannah, who is inexplicably given birth, well, that's the one kind of nitpick that I had, which is I'm like, did they ever tell us like who the father of Hannah's child is going to be? I feel like that kind of needs to be said, but they didn't. And but the biggest surprise for me was that that Salas' son, who is kind of not really a character, who's kind of just there only in a couple episodes, end up being the one killing Ray. That was a big surprise for me. And I still don't necessarily know how I feel about it. I think that was one bit of ambiguity that didn't work for me per se. What about you? What were your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, there were a few things that kind of didn't work for me. I thought ultimately the big twist about Hannah was a little anticlimactic, and her reasoning for it wasn't as satisfying as some of the other twists, kind of, especially the whole like the rich get richer method. I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess.
Kind of playing along with the way we're more of like a survivalist method.
I did like really. Her, and I liked her motivation, like around like not wanting to have her dad just be killed by the the triplets and things like that. And that part of it made sense to me. And I don't know. I did think it was a little more tragic when Leo did kind of contact her at the end saying, I want to come back. And which made it the more sad when I ended up seeing one of the earlier episodes where he's like, something about like he wanting to be that good father for her. And, how, he knows he kind of messed up and, or something to do with her not wanting him to leave. She's like, you're just going to leave again or something like that. And he's like, he's ready to come back into her life, and then he's killed. And I just think that's really tragic. And I don't know, I thought Leo's arc and kind of just whole like beginning to end was kind of, I mean, it was a roller coaster, obviously,
for sure,
very tragic story. Which I guess did you end up piecing together who killed him or?
Oh, well, I saw it. It was so obvious, like the same build, the same design, like the look of it. Yeah, it was Salas' son, like it was right there. I'm like, I didn't think there was anything that needed to be pieced together. I mean, yeah, they tried keeping it a mystery, but I'm like, it's clearly his kid, No,
I actually didn't figure it out right away. I found
that was one of those. If I had one nitpick, it's that the show has so many twists and turns, but there are some things that don't need to be twists and turns. Like again, like them not telling us who the father of Hannah's child is. What's it called? Certain things that may have slipped through the cracks. Like, was Hannah? So this is something that you have to correct me on. Was Hannah working for Salas when Ray contacted her when he first got out of jail about pulling off the heist? Or no, she wasn't. She was working for somebody else. And then when he recruited her, that's when she started working for Salas to get back at her. Like, was she already planning to get back? Because she knew from the Violet episode that Salas had something to do with her mom's death, because Ray clearly told her, she knew who Salas was. He came over to their house all the time when she was a kid, so.
I believe she was in like a low ranking position within the company. She had like just started working there. I'm pretty sure.
Right.
Obviously then it was 7 years. She proved herself to be
so
very
she had
worthy.
time, and then you have the beginning of Yellow where she works her way
she
up by proving her worth. Salas.
Like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. That was the only bit that like kind of slipped through the cracks for me, where I'm like, what? Like, like kind of again piecing it together. I was at this thing where like when I'm watching TV shows, like I'll watch the initial couple of episodes and then I'll like need a break and then I watch the rest. And usually if it's good, I'll like lock in. But there'll be some moments where I'm like, wait, how did this happen again? And then I'm too lazy to go back and rewatch the first couple. But yeah, that was just one thing where I'm like, how exactly did this happen again? Like, did this actually work out? But yeah, so overall, yeah. The only thing that I have to say, as far as the rest goes, oh man, what was it? Oh man, that's what I mean. Like the show is so good. It's so good. Like it's got so many different like layers and stuff on it. So at the end with what's it called? I thought in particular the bit where when Bob has to perform the emergency tracheotomy on himself, in the heist. Okay, I remember now. So RJ, man. Why did Judy kill him? Like, R.I.P. Like, yeah, it was sad. It was a tragedy because he was like, again, he was kind of like another goofy character, but he proved his worth. He was trying to be somebody. He just kept constantly getting picked on, and then he shoots Bob in the ass when Bob is trying to, escape and screw everybody over, and then Judy kills him. Like, it's just, I need to know why, man. I need to
Yeah.
know. Why did you choose Bob over RJ?
It's her, like I said, she can't decide between her allegiance between him or Stan. And
Ugh.
it's like she made she made decisions for both sides, right?
Yeah.
The duration of the heist between, suffocating Bob, which funny enough, Bob didn't even see who was choking him out, so he
Right.
doesn't even know that it was Judy probably, which
Right.
makes it all
That's
the
the
more
other thing too.
hilarious.
That's the other thing too. Yeah, because he's so dead set on in the finale, like finding them because he wants to kill Stan. Because I think that again, he doesn't know who strangled him, but he wants Judy back so badly that he doesn't even really care about getting revenge on who strangled him because he doesn't know. He just knows that they've got the money. He wants it, and he wants Judy back because at this point he just cares more about her than he does about the money, So, but yeah, so again, Judy, it's so interesting because Judy is a character who I feel like if anything else, that type of character who is kind of indecisive about everything, but would kind of really annoy me. But in this one, it really worked. Everything about it just worked. Oh man. Oh, I wish more people were watching this. I wish that more people would just watch stuff like this in general because it's so good and it's so well written and stuff. Unlike it's so funny because I remember I watched Glass Onion on Christmas Day and I really enjoyed it, but like seeing like how that's kind of like almost structured around the fact of it's like, mysteries are kind of dumb and kind of only work on a series of coincidences. So you're going to have to, just kind of go along with it, And I just wish that they were more well done like this, So kind of in order to wrap up our conversation just a bit, although unless you have any other like notes and predictions that you wanted to do, because I will say that I just got out of watching Megan and I wanted to talk about that for just a bit.
Yeah, of course. Well, I have just some notes about. I did think the final twist, like at the very end of White, where he placed the locket. That was
Right.
probably one of the most satisfying parts about the show because he finally, got his revenge. At the same time avenging his wife. He pretty much accomplished everything he set out to do. Like Hannah said, it was never really about the money for him.
Right.
So I thought that was one of the absolute best parts of the show. I'm so glad they saved that for the end, and I think it reinforces the point that I think White has to be the final episode
Right.
that you watch, just because if you did watch it kind of like in the middle or late to end, whenever, but you watch Violet after it, it just doesn't have that kind of weight to it where
Right.
we kind of know the role that Roger Salas played in his wife's death, and about is that very locket they were trying to get to begin with was what kind of led to this whole mess. So I think that was great. And just more about just the viewing order, I think it's something that only can exist in today's kind of format of like
Right.
how we kind of consume media with streaming. Because if they did this 10 years ago, like you said, put it out on HBO or something, they'd have to release them in a concrete order, whether it's
Right.
chronological or not. And it just it doesn't give as much people like that freedom they
Right.
kind of get from making their own story out of it, which I think is great that they're really taking advantage of streaming. I just think from a writing standpoint, it's fantastic. And the planning for it must have taken just so long. I can't even imagine just how precise you got to be with each episode, because you got to treat each one as if it's their introduction to the whole
It's funny that you mentioned that because I have a feeling that with I don't necessarily know if it's the writing aspects that are the difficulty, because all the pieces, again, this is such a well-told story that all the pieces kind of lock into place. I have a feeling that it has more so to do with the storyboarding and the editing process, where they're trying to figure out like what pieces in order to put in what episode in order to make it in a viewing order. But that actually does raise a question that I did want to pose your way. So obviously, as we know, the rise of Gen Z as far as the media consumption, coming out of COVID, obviously, there's always been this big grappling. Studios are wringing their hands as far as like, oh, what movies do people want to watch in theaters versus dumping everything on streaming and just kind of turning the movie business into like just another disposable, internet data sharing business and all that as far as all that goes. So with Gen Z's obsession with video games, you're being one of them, and the fact that it seems like of all the things that Gen Z wants from their stories, they want to have more control. They want to have almost like a say in where the story goes, and there's always a lot of talk about like, oh, but the story didn't go in the direction that I thought it went, therefore I don't like it. There seems to be a lot of those criticisms going towards a lot of the stuff. Do you think that this could potentially be another step in the right direction as far as that goes, if that is the right direction, where the streamers now have the ability to tell these stories and essentially almost like giving the viewers more control over the stories, So do you think, well, what kind of direction do you think that sets us up for, if anything?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's absolutely in the right direction versus just kind of what we've been getting a lot of the last couple years in terms of like whether it's the wokeness or whatever, where they're kind of basically forcing certain messages onto you, or kind of telling
Right.
you kind of this is what we think you should think it too. I really think the more kind of creative liberties you take to leave it ambiguous is kind of what makes a story. It's kind of what gets people talking. It's like, what did you think about this character's decision? Do you think it meant this or blah blah blah? Like Judy, what do we think Judy did? We have answers that kind of point us in the right direction, but like at the end of the day, the show doesn't give us an answer. I think just having ambiguity in general, like as creating discussions, I think really helps a show become what it is, like in terms of like being like really good, something that's like really hitting the spotlight in a way. And I think just I think if more stories, I personally love it when stories do that. Some of my favorite stories ever are kind of like really ambiguous stories like that. Like a Last of Us that's about to come out is
Mhm.
famous for having a really ambiguous ending, and I'm really curious to see how they kind of adapt it, whether they're going to keep it the same to the game or maybe go in a more like a concrete direction in terms of like the answer with it. But yeah, I think it's really good for TVs and movies. I think it gets people talking, and I feel like that only helps it in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more because the biggest thing for me that I've been trying to figure out over the last couple of days, as far as like, as movies unfortunately have fallen victim to kind of, unfortunately, this kind of big political divide and constant ideological struggle that we find ourselves in almost seemingly every day now, where again, the left kind of wants to cram every single form of like, again, the term woke has become popular, but I'd like to think that it's like, again, moralistically high ground messaging down your
Yeah.
throat and kind of using media as a platform for that versus the right, which kind of just wants to essentially leave all messaging out of everything, which I also think is a little bit of a slippery slope and quite dangerous to fall into as well. But for me, I feel like the biggest conflict that both sides are having is trying to figure out what it is that people engage with, and I think that this is a step in the right direction as far as, again, giving people something to lock into and be engaged with, like, unfortunately, at the end of the day, messaging does not engage people, but unfortunately, just kind of existing in and of itself and kind of like this vacuum doesn't really engage people as well. I feel like one of the biggest things about House of the Dragon that, as far as like kind of being like almost like a solution to Game of Thrones, and kind of where that screwed up is that Game of Thrones was almost like providing, attempting to provide this hard set conclusion that almost went against exactly what the story was and what it was setting up, versus House of the Dragon almost kind of went back to the drawing board as far as like, okay, breaking down, like, this is what people are interested in. This is what is going to have them talking each side, have characters where you don't know the specific motivations of, have conflict in settings where there isn't necessarily one vantage point. I don't know if you've gotten to this point yet as far as watching House of the Dragon, but the biggest thing that I enjoyed about the finale of that is the fact that this one event, as far as how it was previously displayed in the written form, came off as one way, but presented in visual format presents a completely different take that provides so much more of a three-dimensional structure and struggle that is going to lead to this inevitable conflict that is going to come from this. And I think that that's another step. I think that as far as people trying to figure out like where the future of media is going, I think that the best lesson that they could take away from this, as far as kind of kicking off 2023 and kind of what the message of 2023 is going to be, is make stuff more ambiguous, because ambiguity gets people talking, but not in that kind of turning your nose up to people, making it seem like, oh, I'm so much smarter than you, like a hoity-toity way, just make it about the characters, tell a good story, and, and provide characters where you don't necessarily know their ambiguity or, kind of where they're coming from. I know that's something that I struggle with when it comes to the stories that I like to tell, as far as, stuff that we've worked on, making sure that
Context matters.
context matters, not knowing what side characters are on. I feel like the biggest problem that people are having with movies and that movies are having is making everything black and white again. And it's like, I thought we were getting away from that because black and white stuff was what was turning stuff boring, morally gray. That's what's interesting. If there's one takeaway from Kaleidoscope, that is what we could take away from that. And then it also goes into what I wanted to give a brief shout out as well, which is I just came out of and watched Blumhouse's Megan, which is a movie that I will say Blumhouse ran, I would say, another very successful marketing campaign. I think a lot of people, specifically Gen Zers, are going to go and watch this in the theaters. And what I will say is that the marketing makes this seem like yet another child's play, killer doll, AI robot, like very generic, cheap, easy movie. And I can say that it both is and is not all of those things. This movie is just, it's a buttload of fun. You kind of can figure out exactly where it's going from the opening scene, but it's so much fun and it's so self-aware and knows exactly what it is that you kind of just can't help but enjoy having a blast with it. Like it also helps that the two people that are playing the doll, the person actually doing the physical stand-in for the doll, and I mean, it's not really a doll, it's a robot, and also the person doing the voice for it, just do such a great job of locking you in to the scenarios, and like the context setting up for it as well, I think is surprisingly well thought out as far as like dealing with trauma and like kind of where different like kind of solutions can come from and what are good solutions versus what are bad solutions, and oh no, where this could go. And again, it's a little bit of a smaller movie, so it can't like aim too high as far as its themes and lofty aspirations, but I think it does the best job possible with it as far as like AI, where AI can go, and the problem when it comes to AI and reading human emotions. And it's got a little bit of like a kind of a cheap ending that it sets up for, but it's just a ton of fun. I very, very much recommend it if you just want to go have a good time in the theaters, but not like a good time where it's like people saying like, oh, Thor: Love and Thunder was a good time. Why can't you just enjoy that? Not like that. I'm talking like an actual like genuine good time with some great kills, some awesome moments that'll just make you on the edge of your seat and just eating a bunch of popcorn. I very, very much heavily recommend Megan. It was a ton of fun. So yeah, that's kind of my 5 minutes on that. But Eli, bringing it back to Kaleidoscope, what are your final thoughts and star rating for Netflix's Kaleidoscope? And if there's one thing you could tell people in order to really reel them in and get them to watch it, what is it that you will say? Go.
Oh man, so many things I have to do. About Kaleidoscope, I think it absolutely was, a fantastic show. I have to say, just bravo to anyone that was working on it, because just I can only imagine the headaches that must have gone on trying to just make sure every episode kind of connected the way that it did, and just obviously there's so many factors you have to take into account. You have to account for people watching it in any order. So I mean, and I think they really did a good job. I think they leave twists for the exact right moments. Not all of them, but I think certainly some twists do have really good payoffs. I mean, and again, the whole order, you really kind of get to make it your own story, the order you watch things, where I kind of saw it from the perspective where, our major antagonists or major protagonists were at odds with one another, but I didn't know, like, how deep it went, or, who was really more responsible for the way things were. And then, you see their backstory. You found out one has a terminal illness that's kind of driving him, because I always thought, like, why not just put off the heist? Why are you so like hell-bent on getting it done now? It seems like you guys aren't ready. You need more planning. And, that's what just made it like really satisfying. It's like, oh, now it makes sense. Time is like of the essence for him, and he needs to get this done to like have, real closure, which is just absolutely fantastic. I think star rating, give it like a 4.5. Like I said, there's some nitpicks I have, but really they're not super huge deals. I think really fantastic show. I would love to see more shows like this where they kind of take this approach. I think it could be, the start of like this kind of new craze where, like we said, ambiguity, I think, is a great thing for stories like this. So, and I hope more streaming services take advantage of, the kind of the form that we consume it, and try something like this, because I feel like, not everything new is gonna work out, but I feel like this is one gamble that kind of did pay off on Netflix's end, and I'm glad they went through with it. So, one thing I could say to hook people, like I said before, you kind of get to make it your own story. It's this unique viewing experience that really you can't really do with any other show. So might as well just have fun with it and just watch it in, any order you want. Watch the last episode first. Who cares, right? If it's set up to be, that kind of show, then why not? Why not do it? So, yeah.
Absolutely. It's the first time in a long time where I can say the power is truly in the viewer's hands in a way that it has never been before. I think that's the best thing that I can say in order to really like sell this show to people. I heavily recommend it for all of my dogpiling on Netflix over the last couple of years. When they put out a hit, God damn it, do they hit. Please, for the love of God, people, watch this fucking show. It is the best thing I have seen from them in literal years. So with that, I easily give the show a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is that close. It is just that close to me being there. So that is it. Those are our thoughts on Kaleidoscope. Eli and I will be back on Sunday along with a few other faces, hopefully, in order to talk about the premiere of The Last of Us. We are just getting started. Season 5 is off to a good start. Chris and I will be wrapping up January, as per always, with our top 10 favorite TV shows and movies before we get into the rest of the year and all the content that 2023 is going to deliver. It's going to be an interesting year. Our first full year back. We're fully out of the pandemic, full year of content to cover with you guys. We're going to do all of that and more. But first, Eli, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Well, still don't have that podcast channel yet, but for now,
soon, it's
people want to
happening.
find me. Hopefully, this is the year. If the good people want to follow me, you can pretty much follow me on Instagram. That's all I have that's available to the public at the moment. It's my handle is E_Holicky, like it's spelled on the screen, 45. That's E_Holicky 45. Yeah, shoot me a DM. I love talking with people. I finally had that happen after one of your videos. Someone actually DM'd
cool.
me, and I had a very thought-provoking conversation. So, Jared, if you're watching right now, shoot me another message, man. I'm happy.
Would that be the one and only Jaren if Jaren Talks Movies?
No, it actually wasn't. It
okay.
Was, it doesn't have his last name on his profile.
Okay, interesting.
Jared, so, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's where you can find me.
Absolutely. Please, people, hit Eli up more often. He's a lot smarter than he looks, just saying. And of course, follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to follow the official Talkin TV podcast across all platforms. Like I said, we are attempting to give you guys so much more content with our 5th season. That's right, we are in season 5, year 5 of the Talkin TV run. I still have no idea how we made it to this point, but we're not stopping until we hit that 12 that I keep hinting at. Subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitch, follow us on all the Spotify channels. This will be up on all the podcast feeds tomorrow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any place where you can listen to your podcast. And of course, for myself and Eli, 12 seasons of a short film and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys on Sunday.